This is the video overview for Kit 3 Theme E, the base elements SCI and SIGN. The big ideas of this kit are that this theme is etymological. Connected spellings indicate connected meanings. A lot of what we do with real spelling is to dig into one word or one element and apply that knowledge to other spellings. The family of the base element SCI generates words with knowing as the kernel of their meaning. Science, conscious, and omniscient. This theme will teach that the base element of a word family has a stable spelling, whatever the pronunciation it represents in a word, that it is unsafe to attempt to pronounce an isolated base element as it could well change depending on what suffixes follow. It is far more consistent with real spelling to spell it out. That the digraph SC is one of the possibilities for representing an initial S in a base element. To prepare for this theme, you'll need to go over the topic of base element with your students. The term base element refers to the morphological base of a written word, stripped of any affixes it might have. There's a sequence on page 4 that helps you understand how to isolate the base element and would provide your students practice with removing affixes and trying to boil down the word to its smallest morphological element. When referring to base elements, they should be spelled out and not pronounced. An example of word pairs who share the same base element but whose base element has a different pronunciation in each pair, and this is why it's so important. Please and pleasant both share the base element PLEA, but they're pronounced differently. Act and action, ACT is the base element, again pronounced differently. Define and definite, DEF, IN is also something that changes with pronunciation. Elements can be free or bound. We talked a little bit about this when Pete was here, and I know some of you have gone further with this with your students. It's hard for me to remember this for some reason, and I'm constantly having to refer back to remind myself. But basically, free elements can occur as a single word without the addition of other elements. So they don't need to have prefixes or suffixes to be seen as a word. Bound elements, however, need another element to be a word, so they have to have something bound to them. An example of this is the bound base element RUPT. Without the addition of suffixes or prefixes, RUPT cannot stand as a word by itself. There is a worksheet within this theme where you can practice identifying bound bases. Here are some reminders. An orthographic word family is most definitely not a group of words that rhyme. Here's an example of the word family group of HEAT. Word families are great ways for students to increase vocabulary and sort words, as well as indicate to them that the relationship has to do with the spelling and the meaning, most importantly, and not the pronunciation. Making these with your kids with a variety of words is a great opportunity for practice. The main theme. By analyzing two base elements, one free and one bound, we better understand these orthographic structures. The first base element that's analyzed within this theme is the base element SIGN, with the question, why is there a G present? It's a family characteristic. The G was needed to represent all the members of this family, even as the pronunciation shifts. As I read this here, you'll notice that. We have sign as the base element. When we add these affixes, we have signal, signature, and signify. There, of course, is the suffix chart that is located on the server and within your kit to help students understand when they're adding vowel suffixes. Why is signal not spelled with an EL? It's a good question to work through with your students. Maybe the vowel suffix chart will help. This is an inquiry-based question. Another question might be, why sometimes is the S pronounced like an S and sometimes it's pronounced like a Z? The information here in sign, signature, and signal is that when the base SIGN is freestanding has an initial, or the S is in the initial in a compound, the initial S can only represent the S sound. You can see those are freestanding in the word SIGN, but and at the initial part of the word in the other two. However, the initial S can represent Z when it is preceded by an element or a prefix that has a final vowel letter. That is apparent in the word resign and designer, so that the S changes to a Z sound. There's a full investigation you can undertake with students to further dig into SIGN and whether or not the GN is a digraph. That's on page 11. Homophones, SINE and SIGN. These are important to understand because, as we know with the homophone principle, where possible, spelling shift in order to signify a shift in meaning. The base element SCI has to do with knowing or acquiring knowledge. The examples here are conscious, unconscious, scientist, and conscientious. The variable pronunciations of the base SCI can shift based on that S and what's preceding it. So you can learn a lot from the word omniscient, but basically we find an S sound in letters represented by S, C, and SC, but only if those are before an E, I, or Y. So you can also have the sh sound, as in conscious, if they're followed by this E, I, or Y. They can do both. So we can have science with a S sound, SC, or we can have the sh of conscious if they're followed by the E, I, or Y. Remember that Melvin simply gives us this one word. It's the job of all real spellers, of our students and of our teacher practitioners, to create word banks of words that prove these theories. So having your students locate other words besides conscious that prove this point is important to follow up on in this theme.